the scientists or the people involved don't see them as humans at that moment.
The basis of like the pro-life issue is just to look at someone and say you are good. Like it is a good thing that you exist.
It's good to know the truth. Know the objective truth and make your choice.
What does that mean to communicate the human dignity to someone who doesn't have a faith background? Welcome to the Everyday Saint podcast. We have Ijeoma on the podcast, which I am so excited for because we're going to really delve into some big ethical questions. But before we get started, I wanted to welcome you and just ask you to tell us a little bit about your faith journey.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. So I was raised in a Catholic home in Nigeria, west of Africa. To be precise, in a city called Enugu. It's called Coal City because, coal was discovered there in the early 1900s. Yeah, and then I was born in a hospital called University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital close to coal mines. Why I'm mentioning this teaching hospital is because 17 years later, I came there to study biomedicine. So I was raised Catholic, and I learned my first prayers from my mother, my grandmother. But I really didn't really have that personal relationship with God, to really have the faith, I'm dealing with someone. Not just a set of doctrines or a set of principles I've learned from my parents, even though that was very important. Later on, I entered college to do biomedicine, even though I wanted to do medicine because my mother had a spinal cord surgery when I was 6 years old. And I felt like, I just have to do medicine to understand why nerve cells or neurons, the sense of cells of the spinal cord can't regenerate when they die. So let me go in and do research and find out why. Like my mom, the ones that have, that had been damaged, it couldn't be regenerated. So she was hemiplegic. So I ended up, doing biomedical sciences, I didn't become a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon as I thought I would study. I now specialize in hematology, which is studying blood cells, and also immunology, how our immune cells help our bodies to fight diseases. So when I was in college, in my first year in college, I had this friend who would always come to my room to knock in the morning. I just met her in the first year, and to remind me, hi, Ijeoma, do you want to come for morning mass? Like, we call it morning mass, to go for daily mass in the morning. I'm like, oh, I escaped my mom, my grandmother. How come? I'm now meeting like a mother in school. And she's my mate. She goes to parties a lot. She's just a fun kind of person. But I was shocked. Like she, having that interest to go for daily mass. So that's when I started questioning myself because I was always reluctant. I'll give her one excuse or the other. I wouldn't come. And then my roommates also, who were some years ahead of me, had to warn me, please tell that your friend not to come every morning to knock at the door to disturb us in the morning while we're still sleeping, because usually the daily masses happen early, very early in the morning, like 5 a.m., So that was when I started questioning myself. Oh, really? So it wasn't that I really understood what the mass was or had that relationship with God. So it made me to really want to know more about my faith, who is Christ to me, what's the Eucharist? Is he really there in the Blessed Sacrament? So I got to join some of the classes the priests of in the chaplaincy in my school was given, like kind of doctrine classes to understand better my faith and then grow in my relationship with God. So that's how my faith journey really started.
Right.
Thanks to the foundation my parents gave me, or my mom and my grandmother to be precise. But yeah, it became more personal when I was in college.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, which I think is really interesting because I know the work you do is so scientific, right? And sometimes it can be seen that, like, the faith and the science are kind of opposing one another. So I love that this faith journey happened at the same time that you were also very much beginning an
Beginning my
educational journey
education.
as
Yeah.
well. And so I would love to know more about how you've seen God in kind of your work and what you've studied too, and what that's looked like.
Okay, yeah, the popular opinion is that there's no space for God in science, more or less. Like he's there and we are doing the science, so we can explain everything, through empirical science and all that. But I think it's wrong because God actually made the space for science, not science making space for God, because He's the, or if we don't call it God, there must be an intelligent being that is behind the beautiful things I see, like under the microscope, when I look at the cells, like when we were studying different cells in the body, like the red blood cells that helps to pass oxygen, to our tissues, the lungs, the heart. Or when you're looking at the white blood cells that will help you, to fight all those viruses and bacteria that can invade your body. I'm like, how are they able to do all these things? Who is the intelligent being behind all this, functions of these cells? So there must be an intelligent being. Because I'm a Catholic and I know that's God. So my work has really helped me to see Him, behind the beautiful things. And also, if He's interested in this little molecule, like the cell that has the DNA, which is a beautiful structure that has all the blueprints of a human being, the 4 letters that He organizes in different codes that make us, my hair color different from yours, makes my eye color different from yours. Everything is already at that moment embedded in that DNA that has the blueprint of what I'll be, in future at that moment. So if He's interested in that little thing, it used to make me think, that means He's also interested in my little worries and my little joys, my relationships, my family, and also the big things in my life. So, yeah, my work has helped me also to appreciate, the intelligence behind, how God has helped us to participate in His creation, and be able to do research that can help to bring cures and, make life better for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful it's so heartwarming, right? Like, it's just so sweet to hear how God is intentional with all of us and to really, like, actually let that take root in our hearts, because we can hear that. We see it in the Psalms, like, I knew you before I knit you in your mother's womb. But it's true. It is true. Like, in the very second that happens, everything that we're going to be, everything that we are is right there in that very second,
Yeah.
which is just incredible to think about. And I'd love to know your perspective, too, on how does that communicate, and maybe how does your work even communicate the human dignity of a person? Or what does that mean to you?
Yeah, the human dignity is something that we really care about in everybody. You love your dignity and, you want it to be respected. And the beautiful thing is that at the beginning, the dignity is there, just right from the point of fertilization. My parents coming together to, cooperate with God so that I can be born. So at that moment of their union, I was formed, and it's a dignity that was allowed to reach full potential, and that's why I'm here. So I feel like the allowing, like, the vulnerable moments when, like, at that moment when, fertilization, when I was formed by the egg of my mom, the ovum of my dad. I was the most vulnerable thing on earth within her. And she gave me the opportunity, to reach terms so that I could be who I am today. Really. Yeah.
Right, and it all begins there. Like, you are just as much yourself then as you are now, and you have the same rights then as you do now.
Because my humanness started then.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is a really important point to make, and I love that you're here today to talk to us about that, because especially with your expertise, like this is your profession, is looking at these ethical choices maybe from a scientific perspective. And we can look at these things and hear the arguments and really struggle to put them into words, or especially from a faith perspective. Like, of course, we see that and we're like, this is a human person. God has given this person dignity and worth and has already designed them. But to then communicate that into a secular room of how, like, it's difficult to communicate that human dignity to someone who maybe doesn't have the faith background that we do. So how do you think that coincides together, of even if you are to take faith out of it? Of course, it's the truth, but what does that mean to communicate the human dignity to someone who doesn't have a faith background?
Yeah, so that's why I said the human dignity language is what everybody understands, whether you have the faith or not. And I think, saying, okay, the Catholic teaching, because the faith is, or the church tries to safeguard the truth. So the truth already exists on its own. And there's the truth embedded in natural law that is embedded in every human, whether you are a believer or not. So I feel that can be communicated to everybody, because each of us, cherish our dignity, and we love our dignity as a human, and we know that is, a human person is a good in his own. Just for the fact that you're human is a good. It's good that you're here, because we are the only ones that have that ability to communicate or relate with the infinite. We know that there's something, we are not just mere matter or mortal flesh. I don't know how to put it, but like we have, I'm talking about the ensoulment at this time. We know that there are some aspects of us that are not just mere empirical. Like I know I can love, I can will, I can, I can exercise my, I know I can love, but it's not as if they are tangible. So it's not only when everything can be explained empirically about me. It's not just, I'm not just a pack of cells, or even though, I'm made up of cells and, I have the heart, the brain and all that, but there's something beyond me. There's that, will I call it, there's a soul. I mean, we understand that as Catholics, but I'm just trying to figure out, like, if I'm talking to someone that doesn't have a faith or doesn't believe, but even other religions believe that there's something beyond here, even though some have a different opinion, that everything ends here. But I know that we are different from other creatures because we can think, we can reason, we can will, and so that dignity cuts across every belief or opinion as far as I know, and it can be communicated even if if the person is not a Catholic or a believer. So because it's something we cherish. It's something we desire that is safeguarded. We wouldn't want to treat we wouldn't want to be treated like a thing because we're not a thing, So that's why even in science, it communicates that you can't do experiment on humans just the way you do on laboratory animals, for example. So the dignity cuts across. So, and that, since I'm the same person, my human nature starts right from when my parents come together and the sperm and the ovum fuse together, and that is me. Because that is the substance that the Maker, or God, as we understand it as a Catholic, will ensoul, will, put the soul. At the time when it comes, the church leaves it open. When does the fetus, or when does the embryo become, have soul? Is it at the point of fertilization, or at the second trimester, or third trimester? At what point? It's left open. But what is important is that humanness, that substance, that's when even scientifically, when the sperm and the ovum fuses, something happens. That's the whole blueprint of that person is there at that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
It's something like something's different when that happens, right? Like
Something's different.
like you can't deny that something just happened and created life, like created something that only like two people can do together. Like there's a very specific natural progression that happens that creates life, and that we have this opportunity. And I think something that I was picking up on as you were talking and just reflecting on is like each person is good, and to say that this life is like the whole basis of like the pro-life issue is just to look at someone and say you are good. Like it is a good thing that you exist, and to have the opposite opinion is almost to say like it's bad that you exist. And that can't be the truth because
Yeah, because
that like it just can't be, right? Like we would never say that to someone, like it's bad that you exist. You couldn't.
yeah,
You couldn't say it to someone else. So then why do we have this belief in our society that it's a bad thing that these people exist? And especially, I mean, it's just such a controversial topic to
yeah,
tackle too. And I just commend you for your work in this space, because I can imagine that can be
tough.
tough. Yes. What has that been like for you?
Well, it's true that my research is basically into cancer research. However, I'm also passionate about bioethics education, and sometimes I've worked in laboratories that use cells, to do basic sciences. So you see, oh well, in this lab they're gonna use human embryos, and they're human. It's good. Science even understands and acknowledges it's human. That's why we call it human embryos, because those embryos or the human cannot be like a lizard embryo or a frog embryo. It's human.
It's human.
Yeah.
Right.
So at least we understand that and we agree it's human. So that's why I call it human embryos. Yeah, you could find yourself in that challenging position. How do I navigate? But the beautiful thing is that the reason given to use the human embryo to do research, because of regenerative medicine, to help in vaccine development and all that. People have arguments for that. But surprisingly, as far as I know today, there hasn't been any FDA-approved drugs or medicine that has come out of human embryonic stem cell research. And also, there's now a newer technology that can reprogram somatic cells, like adult somatic cells. When I talk about somatic cells, they have like the complete chromosomes, that can reprogram them to have stemness, like to behave like embryos. So that can be used to, develop vaccines or, medications and the rest. And there has been quite a number of approved medications already from that, from adults cells that have been reprogrammed to become embryonic. So, and that is a good one, that we're already seeing results. So, if we have spent so much, time using embryos, frozen embryos, or to do research, and yet there hasn't been any medication, as far as I know, today that has been approved by the FDA. I feel like there's an alternative, So sometimes when if I'm in such a research environment, there's already an alternative that we can use. So, to navigate this difficulty of treating a potential human being as something for experiment.
Right. And it's so tricky because you look at these studies and they're trying to help people. Like you can see the good that they're trying to do, but then when you use these human embryos, those are human beings that don't get the opportunity for life, right? Like we do. Is that a correct understanding? Like what would happen to these human embryos that they're using for research?
Um, because there are so many opinions or school of thought, how the embryos developed, or how, okay, we have already like past the cells, like they can they've been utilized for several decades. So I don't think the humanness is there, or they are still in potential. They're just cells, so they are not yet human. Some people have that argument, but my opinion is that, like, I always like to think I was once an embryo, so that will, make that argument for me not viable, because I was once an embryo and I was given the opportunity, to reach term and become a human. So since there are alternatives, to use to develop medicine and, advance science and help people cure diseases and all that, we could look more into all those other alternatives and other wonderful, pathways that we can use to also reach, that solution we are looking for, which is better health and, helping people to come out of their difficult situations. So,
Right. And I would think that anyone who is like we all striving for better health. Like we all want to feel good. We all want to have a good quality of life, but I don't know that any of us would say that we would want that at the expense of someone else's life either,
yeah.
right? And that's really, would you say that that's what's happening with this particular form of research, that they're doing the experiments on these human embryos. So this idea of better health is now at the expense of someone else's life.
Even in science, how bioethics, came about is because we've learned this mistakes in the past. For example, some research that were done on African American men in Tuskegee in, I think, 1932 to 72. It was 40 years. Of study on syphilis. So they were not, told, the real reason for the research and all that. But, well, the reparation has been made and all that. So science already knows that humans are, we are not just lab animals. So there's has to be that ethics around research, that concerns us, and our dignity is what we also care about. So that give rise to ethical institution of review boards, ethical review boards in different research institutes to guard the use of, humans during experiments, to avoid unethical practices. So, yeah, if we already understand that we humans can be treated like, lab animals, more or less,
Right.
or without their consent, and that appropriate procedures must be followed. So it's something we all understand, and we will cherish if our dignity is, preserved and respected.
Yes, absolutely. And we see that with the example that you just gave with the Holocaust and all the experiments that they did on
Exactly.
humans then. That's terrible, right? Like we want to uphold the dignity of anyone and everyone. And I'm curious then, we've seen those examples, and I don't think there's anyone that would say those things are good, what happened in those two instances. So then how did we get at the point where it's okay to experiment on human embryos?
Well, because it's a human, in my own understanding is that I'm human right from the very moment. So when will it now be right for me to be used for experiment? Am I not the same person? It's like saying, okay, a baby just born now. she hasn't or he hasn't reached his potential cannot write or make a sentence that makes sense. But that's a baby, that's a human. So I don't know when exactly it will be the appropriate time to experiment on human.
Right. No, there's no
So
call
I don't
for
know.
it, right?
I don't know when because really is in my own understanding. I always use me because if I were not given that opportunity, I wouldn't be here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Treat others the way that you wish to be treated, right? Like that's
Like
golden
I'm a
rule.
human.
Like,
I was a human right from the
exactly.
beginning. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a difficult thing to understand in our times because we are not seeing the whole human figure, the eye, the baby laughing and all that at that moment. So we feel their self, and we can experiment on them since they're still in potency.
Right.
But I feel like I was once, in that state, and I was vulnerable at that moment, and I was allowed to reach term.
Yes. And with these, could you explain how they even get the human embryos in the first place? Like,
Well,
how does that happen?
okay, so coming to IVF, in vitro fertilization, is a very, controversial topic and something that people say, well, yeah, this is good because it helps us to have babies when we cannot. And people have their right. It's a legitimate, desire to have your baby, to be happy that you can have your own baby. And then science is meant to be there to help, provide solutions. But we also have to look at the process of providing the solutions. So, like they will say, okay, is the Catholic teaching, the Catholic Church is doesn't allow IVF. I really don't go through that route of argument because I always like to discuss, but we are humans, and so what is the natural or the inscribed in the law of God, okay, because I'm a Christian, that is the appropriate environment for a human being to be born. It's within marriage. So when there's that, what is actually the nature of marriage is procreation, union, the unity and the procreative aspect of marriage. So once there's that division, or schism, every other thing that comes from that, that's actually the philosophical or the reason why it's not, the Catholic Church safeguards or says IVF procedures, it separates this unity and the procreative aspect of creation. Apart from other step-by-step procedures that entails hyper, overstimulating the woman to produce a lot of eggs, that could have also health risk. Even though it's recorded that it's minimal, but the health risks are there. And the man provides the spermatozoa, or the sperm is harvested, and then is put in the laboratory petri dish, and the fertilization occurs there. And well, I feel like that's a human that we are already putting under, the petri dish, looking under the microscope. It doesn't safeguard that dignity. It doesn't, in my own opinion, it removes, even though it's something that is apparently solve a desire of a couple that really wants to have a child, which is legitimate desire. However, the process and does it really go in line with the natural law of God? That necessarily is not the Catholic teaching, but is inscribed in our hearts that the unitive and the procreative aspect of marriage, is important. Is the way, human we came about, in the world. So um, the other aspects of other things that come around IVF, after the fertilization, it may not also be possible for the egg to be implanted. The embryo to be implanted in the mother of the child or the potential mom. And now you have like surrogacy, where a woman can lend her womb, to have the baby, to take all the burden, which, is in practice, like in my country too. We have, people that can become surrogates. And that some people frown at it because it's like, oh, you're using me like to solve your problem. But it's there for debate. Is it appropriate? Is it right to just, use another woman to solve your problem? This kind of, so there's still debates going on there. Some laws have been established and some people don't find it. So why I talk about this is just for people to have like a holistic view of everything so we can make our informed decisions when we are faced with these challenges, which really are real. And if we're still in high school and college and you get to see yourself in such a situation, what kind of decision will I make? Do I have all the picture to be able to arrive at an informed, decision? And these are the reasons why the church safeguards the truth about the unitive and the procreative aspect of marriage. And then also, while doing, you can't fertilize only one egg. I mean, you have to have several. Remember, you have to overstimulate the woman, to produce a number of eggs.
Right.
And that will be fertilized. So you have like multiple embryos, and you may not want to implant all of them, right? And then that also gives room for pre-implantation selection, checking the ones that have genetic problems and they are discarded. And that, is abortifacient in nature, because they're discarding human beings. And or the eugenics that also surrounds that pre-implantation process. So it's good to have all this picture and understand the real science or the procedure of IVF so we can make our informed choices.
Absolutely. And in this whole topic of conversation, it seems so personal at times because the IVF, the desire is good, and any child that was conceived by IVF, like we would never say that child is bad, right? Like we rejoice in the gift that is this life, but the problem is the means by which that life was brought about. So we rejoice and we support the life, but we don't support how it happened. And especially, IVF is something difficult to understand, something I don't think that we do get the whole picture of. Would you be able to maybe explain, that process of IVF and maybe some things that people don't understand about why it's a morally poor decision?
Oh, like I just said, it's the process or the first premise is the whole thing of the schism between the unitive and the procreative aspect of marriage. So that's already, the church, teaches that it's even in the encyclical of Pope Paul the Sixth, called the Humanae Vitae, where he mentioned the contraceptive does the same, because sometimes the church teaches, why does the church frown at contraception? Why does the church frown on, it's as if the church is seen like a backward, like people that drag science, it makes us not to progress. But the church safeguards the real teaching of God, the thing of the sacredness of life, the sacredness of marriage, so the unitive and the procreative aspect is how God has made instituted this sacred union, how we all came about. So, for IVF creates that division. That's the first premise. And some people may argue, well, I don't even need to marry. So I just want to have a baby and I want to, you know, have my child. So I can also go to IVF clinic and get treated. So it's seen as a treatment. But I know that some hospitals or some fertility clinics help people to really solve the real problem. Why is there a fertility issue? So there must be an underlying condition, and try to solve all that, around it before, giving the option of IVF if that exists in those kind of clinics. So, it's there's also another solution, helping the body of the woman and the man to really go to the root cause of the problem. Okay. And then some people still don't want to go through that process because maybe it's time consuming and very emotionally exhausting. So they'd rather go to the IVF and get it done. But what the truth about the faith is that, okay, the unitive and the procreative aspect of marriage can be separated, shouldn't be separated. And then, apart from like what I've just spoken about, some of the procedures of IVF that entails eugenics, that is also like treating, looking at humans under the microscope and choosing who should live and who should not live, because they are called cells or embryos at that moment. Well, I always like to think I was once an embryo, so I always have to keep telling myself that, And then the reason for that, or the desire of the couple to have a baby, is illegitimate. Fine, it is. They have the desire, but there are other options that could be time consuming and, like I said, emotionally exhausting, that people may not have the time to really follow through. And each case is each case. Or there could also be a possibility of no solution. And the IVF is like the only solution. But I like to think that there are other solutions, like adoption. I mean, it's true that someone will want to have her own biological child or is a legitimate, desire. But there are good souls that can also be adopted. Could give the chance, to have a mom and a dad. So it's these other aspects that somehow some embryos are discarded, some are termed not viable, they're human beings, or they can die on their own. Some people can argue, but women can have miscarriages. Yeah, it's natural, but you didn't cause the death.
Right.
Right.
It's they naturally happened versus this abnormal, unnatural way of doing it and then causing a death because of it.
And you can also freeze them. If you freeze, that's another, another topic, another problem of we have lots and lots of frozen embryos.
Right.
And then that's why the argument of using them to do research comes up. So it's good for people to have a holistic view of all this stuff, so that when you find yourself in this kind of condition, what kind of decision would you make? Which way would you choose?
Right.
It's good to know the truth. I mean, know the objective truth and make your choice.
Yes, exactly. And thinking about my own experience, like I'm 21 years old, right? And before even having this conversation, I hardly knew anything about IVF. I started to do a little research in preparation for this conversation, honestly, because I knew that the church condemns it, and I knew that as a pro-life person that I couldn't support IVF, but I didn't entirely know why. And hearing you explain it and other things that it's been described, it's like, yes, we want the child, like we're always going to celebrate a child, but the issue comes in when there are other children dying because of it. And as you're saying, being discarded, like that should raise red flags for us, right? Children being discarded. Okay, that's what it is the issue is not the child that, the life that comes about because of it. The issue is all of these human beings that are now not treated as human beings anymore.
Because the scientists or the people involved don't see them as humans at that moment, which is a very, serious, topical, controversial issue that we have. So it's good that we understand the reason and the whole process, because sometimes we can do things out of ignorance or not knowing.
Right. Exactly. And that's why the education about it is so
important.
And it's to really understand what's happening when you make these decisions, or even when you just talk to someone about it. I'm not married, I'm not looking to have children, but yet I might encounter someone who has some of these questions. And especially if you're someone of faith, this topic could come up in a conversation. So even as someone, and for all the people who are listening that aren't in your field of research or aren't able to be in the rooms to feel like they can make changes when it comes to this ethical dilemma, what advice do you have for us? Like, where can we go from here?
Yeah, because if you say, IVF is not the solution, so what's the solution? So because the problem exists. I mean, people have infertility issues. That's a fact. So I think some research has been done to solve the real cause of the problem that some, clients or patients could have. That's why I talked about, looking at the holistic, the person as a whole, what exactly is causing the fertility. So some doctors are already going that route, to provide solutions that could take time, that may not be very fast in coming, quick in coming. And then I know there's also, I think in the John Paul II Institute, they've done a research that helps, I don't know what it's called again, this is really terrible. It's a research on how to help to time the woman's cycle.
Oh, like
so
natural
to help
family planning?
not just natural, is the well, I've not. I don't have the name at the moment, but it may come. Yeah, but has helped some people to achieve pregnancy. I'm not really into gynecology, like the practice or more basic science.
Right.
But I think, there are some solutions, okay? And also there's that possibility of adoption, which may not really go well with some people. Like, I don't want to adopt, I want to have my own child. But adoption is also a good option. Yeah, it's also a viable one. And I think we some people are doing science to help solve the real cause of the problem, and help people to achieve pregnancy without necessarily having recourse to IVF.
Right. And as you're talking about this research too, I would think the upholding of the dignity of the human person should be at the forefront of this. And while it's difficult to come to terms with and difficult to say, I mean, that should take precedence over just the quickness, like the quick. I don't want to say easy option because I don't quite think that's the right word.
It's not really easy even to go through IVF.
Right, exactly.
So it's also exhausting for women.
Yes.
I haven't gone through that, but I have friends, that have gone through that, and they have some, hormonal imbalance or some, problems health-wise. That for some people is transient, some people, it lingers, but they consider they don't mind to go through that to have a baby. So yeah, whether there are difficulties in passing through an IVF course is obviously there. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, we're just about at our time now, but I do want to, I mean, this is such a big topic. I feel like we
Yeah.
could really like delve into a lot of different facets of it. And it is such a big topic that I
Yeah.
hope people can take this conversation and maybe pick out a couple points to really research a little bit more on their own. But before we end the recording, I would love to open the floor to you if there was anything else that you would like to say before we wrap up.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to encourage people to, especially Catholic young people, to really read wide and first of all, starting with the encyclical Humanae Vitae. Okay, right. Pope Paul VI. Sorry, I think I said Pope John Paul VI before, but Pope Paul VI. Then, to understand the philosophical and the scientific reason behind, the real problem of IVF. I've enumerated some of them. To also, like, I would like to see forum or programs that can help form young people, prior to marriage, to understand all this big issues. So probably organize a parish level or, I don't know, in colleges, like for
Right.
people to sign up freely if they want to learn in all these issues that are tagged, the church is against. And also, it's also to think about it. It's not really that the church is against science. No. Faith and reason go together, and we can always have this conversation with people that are not Catholics also, or that don't have the faith, because this is science we're talking about. This is about human dignity, and this is about, giving real solutions to people. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this information. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate that you've taken such a strong stance on this topic and really done a wonderful job of explaining it. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.